I'm Chris Heilman. I work for Mozilla as the principal evangelist for HTML5 and the open web. I'm a web developer for 16 years now. I worked in Yahoo, built parts of Yahoo Maps, built parts of Yahoo Answers. I worked on McDonald's UK, went through every content management system on this planet and hated that it interfered with what I did on the front line. And the last 2 years, I concentrated more on mobile and on app development, but not because app development is a new thing, but just reminding people that what the web had, some of the app worlds don't have, which is actually a step back in time. So, without further ado, let me go and introduce you to the whole concept of what I have here. So the internet is actually yours. The internet is incredible. I mean, probably all of you have had studies, have looked at Wikipedia, have shared with friends over Skype, have shared with friends over Google Docs, found information that years ago were actually not available to us. When I was in school, I had to go to university library to get books, and I had to wait until the books came back because somebody else kept them for too long. So I got bad marks because I couldn't get to the information. And when I found the internet, I'm like, this is amazing. I can find things immediately, every second, from everywhere. Of course, the problem is you find a lot of wrong stuff as well, but nothing is kept from you. And I used to work as a radio journalist. I used to do the news on radio. And my biggest problem there was, if you want to be on radio, if you want to be on television, you either have to be really rich because you have to pay a lot of money to do that, or you have to be a celebrity already, or you have to commit a crime, and then your act needs in the news. None of that was an option for me somehow. So I found the internet instead and realized, like, hey, if I just open a blog with open source software, WordPress, or things before that, and start writing and start sharing what I know as a developer, or finding solutions for problems and just writing them down for myself, how I found these solutions, and publish them, people will come and read. And I've had a blog since 2005, and I've got like lots and lots of visitors every week, and it fascinates me how easy it is to become published on the web. I also published a few books, and that was always a pain because you have to go through a lot of processes, you have to go a lot of red tape, you got contracts. And on the internet, just go and give out the information and get feedback from people and deal with feedback the right way. This is actually a 24-hour, actually 2 days illustration of what internet activity looks like. So the warmer it gets, the more activity. And you can see that there's a lot of sparkling stuff going on. And sadly enough, there are still a few blind spots, except for Australia, because nobody lives there, so it doesn't really matter down there in the middle. But anywhere else, this all should light up. This all should be web-enabled. This all should be people that can be on the web and learn things from it. And I think it's very, very scary when I see that governments try to control the internet right now and try to limit our access to it by saying they want to protect us from it. Because who watches the watchman? Who protects us from the people who don't know the internet? That's a lot of big questions that we have. So in Mozilla, we're a non-for-profit organization to keep the web free. That's why we're here. We came up with Firefox because Internet Explorer was the only browser available out there. You had to have a Windows computer, you had to have Internet Explorer, and that was it. And Internet Explorer made all kind of random stuff that was not standardized, that was not agreed upon, and people became connected to that, build things that only worked for Internet Explorer. That's why we said that's not right. So we came up with a browser that was open source from the very beginning and supported the standards that were agreed on. And with the Webmaker project, what we did in the last 2 years is reminding people that the internet is not fixed. It's not something you buy, that when it breaks, you have to buy a new one. Or you have to go into a shop and talk to a genius and actually talk to as if you don't know anything. The internet is read and write. This is my slides here. I can do this. I can see the code behind it. I can edit the code live. I can change that code. Nothing of you is actually hidden. You can learn from other people's mistakes. You can learn from other people's successes. A lot of people learn web making or web development by looking at other people's code, and that's something that is vanishing a bit. And we wanted to make sure that people realize that it's not about consumption, but it's about using the web and becoming a maker, becoming a creator. Even if it's an ugly website about your dog and your favorite flowers, you've done something, you've written something that you didn't do before. And not everybody can compose music, not everybody can write poems, but putting a website together that gets you excited and send to your friends, that's a great thing. So over there we have the Make the Web area of Mozilla, whole day you can go up there and learn about these kind of things and what kind of training we do to get the elderly, to get children, to get journalists and other people who don't know the web to understand the web and actually start playing with it. And especially nowadays in in browsers, it's amazing that you can go, for example, into this headline here, and you can just open it and say, okay, this is the main header. I'm in this section here. I click that, I go into the header, and I don't like what I've written here. I say web making not so long ago, I say web making now. And it changed. You see that the web is hackable, it's changeable. And that's a very important thing not to give away, because that made it possible. The low curve of getting into becoming a publisher, becoming a maker, made it the success that it is. So the first thing that we did was Hackasaurus, which actually was something aimed at kids. That was an add-on to Firefox, or just this X-ray goggles here, that when you clicked on it, it showed you the outline of a page. It showed you what something is that you move your mouse on. So it's something that later on became these developer tools that you've seen, but this could be done with any website. So it allowed children to put their own photo onto the BBC homepage all of a sudden. And like, yay, I'm on the BBC homepage. Of course they weren't, but on this computer they were. And for them that was cool. And that was a great start, but the problem was that it was aimed at children. So a lot of people looked at that like, that's kid stuff, I'm not going to go there. So the next thing we came up with is Mozilla THIMBLE. Mozilla THIMBLE is actually an online editor, an editor tool that allows people to see what they're doing on the left-hand side directly on the right-hand side. So instead of having to do the saving and understanding the thing, I could just go in there right now and just say of systems, and it's life-changing. And instead of having just an empty page where is that still working? Yeah. Instead of having just an empty page, we just had projects that we let people change. So these could be teaching projects in school. This could be just simple projects for fun. In this case, a little cartoon where you can do your own things and write your own texts in. So instead of telling people the web starts with writing a doc type and an HTML tag, we gave them something to play with. Some of these had errors in them, and we actually, by fixing the errors, the display on the right-hand side became correct. So that gave people a lot more step into the web without having to deal with the problem of learning technology. And that became very, very common. In the last year, we had a massive amount of new development coming out that collaborative coding is the big new thing. Instead of writing something, putting it on your server, going on a mailing list or on Facebook or on Google Plus or on Twitter and saying, why doesn't that work? You just you could do it live. You can go basically to JSFIDDLE or JSBin and open that there, write your code directly and say like h1 hello. And it shows it live to you, and you can send it around the web and say like, where's my problem? Where's the issue here? And that makes it so much faster to write code and debug code, because whenever I wanted to help people on mailing lists in the past, I didn't know their code. I didn't know what they did wrong, so I could not tell them what to fix. In this case, I go there, I fix it for them, I save it, they get it back, hey, we fixed it together, we're done. It was a 5-minute job. So collaborative coding is a massive new thing, well, not new thing, but a massively good thing. And that is not only for coding, that's also for writing. Like everything in Mozilla happens on Etherpads. We just write together or on Google Docs, and we don't even have meetings anymore where we print things out or somebody has to type it up afterwards, because we type it up during the meetings. Dropbox, of course, is great as well. If this laptop falls down, I don't have anything lost, because all of my stuff is on Dropbox and the other stuff is on an external hard drive at home. All I have to do is buy a new computer, connect to my Dropbox, get all the stuff in there. I've got all the settings of my software there. Everything is online in the cloud, you could say, but that's such a silly word by now. We don't use that any longer. And then all of a sudden, the big shift came. We have these things, we had these massive computer things that people have out there, and then the shift to mobile came. Out of a sudden, everything was about mobile. Nobody uses laptops any longer. It's, oh, if you don't have an iPhone, then you're not cool. Everything had to do these things. And with the shift to mobile came the shift to apps. People tell me now, like, oh no, websites are boring, apps are cool. I can go and build an app and make millions of dollars tomorrow, because that's what the press told me several times. Not gonna happen that quickly. Might happen if you're really lucky, but you have to compete with a lot of other apps in there. So an app is being sold to us as this new cool thing and something that hasn't done before, and it's the faster thing, the better option than these boring web things out there. Might be. For some things, yes. Some games don't make sense to put them on the web. Something like Spotify I love to have as an app because I don't want to have it running in a tab. Because I'm using my computer to build things, so my memory is going all the way in the browser anyways. I want to know where the memory went. If my music would be playing, I wouldn't know that. So what is an app? An app to me is actually something that does one thing well. That defines an application. An application doesn't allow me to take pictures, listen to music, and actually play games. That would be a stupid application because it would be a portal. It would be an operating system. It would be more than an app. It does one thing well, and it's built for that purpose. It's something that works wherever I am, offline and online. A lot of apps are basically shells that just get content from the web and are useless, even though I downloaded them for 15 megs. The British Airways app used to be that. I installed the thing, downloaded it. When I was at an airport in another country where my SIM card didn't work, my British Airways app didn't work. It's an airline app that I need to actually get my tickets from. So if that one doesn't work offline, it's a use case that should be much better, and we're going to talk about offline much more later. It's something that lets me do things. A lot of websites are there to read. Wikipedia is probably 99% reading, 1% messing around with it or writing new content. And apps are mostly there to do things with them. You play a game, you upload your images, you listen to music, you share music with your friends, you describe a video, you tag onto other people's stuff. So you do things with it rather than just consuming. And it's something that's simple to use. If your app is hard to use, it doesn't matter if it's an app or not. People will not like that thing. Make it as easy as possible and think about the form factor. Think about small screens and don't build it on a big screen and then put it on a small screen and wonder why people don't like it. Because they download lots of content that they never look at. Make it snappy, make it fast, make it easy to use. It's something that stays up to date and syncs across devices. And native applications don't give me that at the moment. I've got Temple run on my mobile phone, I've got Temple run on my desktop, on my tablet. Why are they not syncing? Why do I have to solve the same problems in the same game, although I own both devices? Because they're not web-enabled, because they're not web applications, they're native apps that are their own silo that don't talk to anybody else. Something that I can own and customize. People love to customize their applications. They put background images in there, they put Comic Sans Serif in their chat app because they're sick. And they do things that you wouldn't expect them for a website to do. When we worked for Yahoo, we did this. We had this whole change the background color of Yahoo and things. And we had this for a few months. Shut it down. Nobody cared. Nobody did it. But in applications, we seem to be much more, we are owning this thing. So people have a bigger relationship with apps than they have with websites. Now, when the iPhone came out, there was a big promise from Apple on stage, and it was called no SDK required. Steve Jobs sat on stage. Safari is the best browser on this planet. Debatable, but it's a good browser, so much for sure. And he said there is no need to write any native code for the iPhone. Everything can be done in HTML5 because HTML5 is awesome and Flash is the Antichrist. That's more or less what he said. In other words, but it was more or less that. And he said you can access the camera, you can access the maps, you can do everything on the phone just with HTML5. And I was sitting in front of the television set and I'm like, thank you, yes, yes, we need this. We invented HTML5 to make the step from documents to applications. Basically, we gave you offline storage, we gave you things to access the camera, we gave you things to access the accelerometer of a phone. And then we actually needed a platform to make people use that stuff. And the iPhone was that platform. Nobody questions that. They did a great job at that. Sadly enough, a few months later, they said like, well, you know, this HTML5 thing, we cannot give you access to the camera. But you can learn Objective-C, you can download this 4 gig of SDK, you can pay us $99, and then you're allowed to access the camera. And I think that's not fair. I think that's not right, especially $99 is not right. In the UK as a band, you go to a club to play music and they pay you for that. In America, some clubs ask you to pay first up to be allowed to play in the club. That's not right. The band should get the money, and this is what it's about. And developers should be allowed to make money without having to spend money and go into an environment that is actually locked in. So As Mozilla, we could have stood back and say like, okay, Apple is on the case, Microsoft is on the case, BlackBerry is on the case, Google is on the case, they're going to sort it out. They're going to find out that the whole app thing is cool, but actually limiting developers is not a good idea. Sadly enough, we realized this is not good enough, so we had to do something. And when we're good at something, then it's basically just sitting down and doing something. And this is when Firefox OS came around. Firefox OS was an empty repository on GitHub 2 years ago. From day one, Firefox OS was open source, nothing hidden. Conference calls you can dial in, the meeting notes are available, the mailing lists for all the bugs are discussed are open, the software is on GitHub for you to download. And what Firefox OS was a new approach to this mobile space and the app space with a web idea behind it. So instead of making a native environment that is locked down, we took the core that is on Android, the Linux core that talks to the hardware. We got rid of the rest of Android. We didn't have the Java layer, we didn't have the Android API layer, but instead we used Android because it was free. We would have used iOS, but it's not free, so we couldn't. So on that, we put the rendering engine that is in Firefox, what makes HTML5 work, and talk directly to the hardware with JavaScript APIs. So you don't need to learn Java, you don't need to learn Objective-C, you don't need to learn C#, you don't need to learn Perl, Lingo, or whatever you want to learn. You write HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript, and you got full access to the phone, and you can write applications in the same technology that the phone operating system was written in, which means that the performance of your applications will be much better from the very beginning because the operating system needs full performance access. And your app doesn't get treated worse than the operating system like it is in other operating systems out there. I call it the mobile platform HTML5 deserves because we had promises from others, but then we started playing with them. We realized the performance of HTML5 apps is not as good as native apps on other platforms. And again, this is not fair. If you said HTML5 is awesome and Flash is bad, then please follow up on that. It has predictable browser support. That's another big issue on players like Android. Older Androids have stock browsers that don't get upgraded. You cannot get the newest Android on a 2-year-old phone. So you're stuck with a broken browser that doesn't understand the newest HTML and hardly understands the older HTML APIs. So it's the new Internet Explorer 6 problem, and as web designers we all hate Internet Explorer 6, but a stock browser of older Android has exactly the same issues because they made exactly the same mistake of hardwiring the browser with the hardware. And if you cannot change the browser in the hardware, this thing gets outdated and it gets terrible for end users, and end users should not suffer. It's also targeted at a completely new market. So a lot of people are like, oh, I would love to do HTML5, but my apps are never going to be as cool as the iOS apps, so people are not going to buy them. What Firefox OS is, we released it in 5 countries so far. We released it, or 4, anyways. We released it in Spain first, because Telefonica is there, has the infrastructure, it worked out. We released it then in Poland, because another partner of us, Deutsche Telekom, wanted to release something in that market that is low-end and high quality as well. Released in Venezuela and in Colombia. And these countries, you can't afford an iPhone, you can't afford a newest Android, and you cannot even get iPhones in some of these countries. So what Firefox OS does is bring the mobile revolution, mobile technology, mobile computing into countries that are now locked out, and that's not fair. These blips that I showed you, I don't care if they're desktop or mobile. I want people on the web, no matter where they're from, no matter what they do. And this is what Firefox OS gives you. It's targeted in getting rid of these feature phones, the old Nokias, the old Motorola's, the things that allow you to play Snake and send text messages, and that's it. These are the phones that we're replacing with smartphones that are web-enabled and give you all the things you expect from a smartphone. Facebook, Twitter, taking pictures and sharing them with the sharing service of your liking. All the things that actually people want to do with a smartphone, you can now in a market where you can actually afford it. So for example, in Spain, the phone is 79 euros, and there's already 30 euro on there to buy apps with. So that's a 40 euro phone that I could buy for my kids, and if they flush it down the toilet, I don't care. With an iPhone, I would probably care if 600 euros were gone. And it's also a great opportunity for new people that just want to have a second phone to actually start something. It's very affordable hardware. The pricing is really, really affordable. There's no credit card needed. That was another big issue. I buy an Android phone. Awesome, I got an Android phone. I want to buy some apps. Where's your credit card? I don't have a credit card. You don't get apps. So I think there might be like some scratch cards that you can buy in shops for Android by now as well. I know there's on iTunes. But this is just not right. I should not have to put my credit card information on a device that might get lost or stolen just to buy some apps. So Firefox OS allows you to buy apps with the money that is on the SIM card already, prepaid money, or it comes on the telephone bill at the end of the month. So there's, again, if you give your kid a Firefox OS phone, they're not going to play like whatever game and out of a sudden bought 6,000 sheep and you don't have any money on your bank account anymore. It's only the money that is on the SIM card that can be used. It's web technologies through and through. There's nothing in there that's not open. There's nothing in there that you haven't seen on the web before. And that's something that is completely unique to this operating system. WebOS had similar ideas, but didn't follow through and sadly enough wasn't a big success, partly because it was too early to the market. A lot of WebOS applications have been ported to Firefox OS within minutes because it was the same idea, the same technologies. We've got 18 mobile partners and 4 hardware partners, Telefonica being a big one for it. Everything in the operating system is open web technology and standard proposals. This is the source code of the calculator application on the phone that you buy in the shop. You could go to GitHub, download the operating system, take a look at how we built the operating system, which in other places is always dark magic that you're not allowed to touch, or you get it 2 weeks later after it got released, which is not open source, it's tada source. Look what we've done and now help us fix our bugs. We do it the other way around. We put bugs in so you find them and we do it with them. That's his job mostly. Applications are the same thing as other applications. They're things you can download, you can install, and you can actually use. And they're full screen, they're not in a browser, you don't have to go to a URL and type a URL in to get your app. You got a marketplace for that. It's the same thing that you would expect from any other system, and end users love that kind of stuff. It works out for everybody out there. The way to turn a HTML5 page or a mobile optimized HTML5 page into an app is as simple as writing a manifest file in JSON. This one defines the name of your application, your icons, who the developer is, where your app is on the web, and what kind of access you want to have to the hardware. Like, do you want access to the camera? Do you want to have messaging going on? Do you want to have the things that your app needs to do? Depending on what your app does, there's different levels of apps that we allow you to build. To install an application, you can go to the marketplace, find the application, install it, be happy. That's what end users do. If you already have a successful website out there and you want to allow people to install the application from that website, this is the code you have to write. This is all they have to do. Install app, navigator, mozapps install, point to the manifest. You've got an on-success handler and an on-error handler. This means that actually anything on the web can point to your application. The money that your company spent on search engine optimization in Google the last 7 years has not been wasted, because you can now redirect people to the app seamlessly that way, and you don't even have to force them to do it. That's my biggest pet peeve right now when I go to websites that I've been using for 5 years on my phone, happily, and now they tell me, we now got a native app, do you want to download that instead? And you're like, no, you're in the way of the use case that I already love, so please don't do that. But an install button up there to say, if you want to have offline functionality, if you want to get access to your camera, if you want to have all the extra features, here's a button to do that, and it's seamlessly installing it. All the access to the hardware is defined in web APIs. It's open, standardized APIs that are agreed with the W3C, the What Working Group. Other browser vendors like Opera and Chrome and Microsoft Internet Explorer are building some of these into their browsers as well, because everybody needs to solve the problem of accessing the hardware from a browser, which sadly enough not too many people are going all the way with it, but that's why we're a non-for-profit organization. We can do this kind of stuff without our shareholders telling us why you're doing this, because it has to be done. That's why we're doing it. So you have access to all the things on the phone. Vibration API. You say navigator.vibrate 1000 and the phone would vibrate for a second. You say 1500, 2500, it vibrates for a second, waits for half a second, vibrates for 2 seconds, waits for half a second, and goes on like that. That's how easy it is to access the hardware with a simple thing. Screen orientation, geolocation. Mouselock API for 3D environments, open web apps, which I just showed you, network information, battery status, all kind of things that make it interesting to use phones. Ambient light sensor. Is it dark or light around the phone right now? Should I show a black on white text or a white on black text to make it most readable? You can find this out with a simple JavaScript call now. Example is the battery API. Navigate a battery gives you the number of gives you a lot of methods and a lot of objects to actually read out. And you can find out the level of the battery right now. You have events firing when the level changes, when the battery is getting empty. For example, telling somebody, hey, you only got 20% left. Do you really want to start uploading these 20 photos? Or do you want to start later? Is preventing frustration for end users. And that's what we do by building interfaces. We stop people from frustrating themselves. And sometimes we need to have knowledge of what the battery is, for example. There's 3 levels of access. There's hosted applications, which are on your server, which are like anything on the web, easy to upgrade. You got limited access, though. We cannot allow any server on the web to put an application on the phone and access the address book or access the camera. This is how malware happens, so we have to limit that somehow. So there's privileged applications. Privileged applications are reviewed by the Mozilla App Store. So we have a security check of those, we have a quality check of those, and we have a content check of those. They need to be packaged and signed. So they're not lots and lots of files on your server that you can upgrade one by one. They have to be one zip file that cannot change, because if it changes, we don't allow it to be installed any longer, unless it gets reviewed. And you have certified apps. These are applications that only Mozilla and partners are building. These are the parts that make the operating system, like the dialer app, like the address book, like the things that only partners and us should have right to change because you don't want to give your address book to somebody you don't know. If you still need access to the camera, for example, or to the address book, and you don't want your app to be packaged and sent from a Mozilla server or actually packaged into a marketplace, there's a thing called web activities. This is a bit like Intense in Android, or Web Intense used to be in Chrome before they shut it down. Instead of authenticating on behalf to the user, you just let the user do the thing for you, which is an extra step in interactivity, but I like it actually. So what is an example of that? You have configure, open, cost control, dial, pick, share, record, and so on and so forth. You see, I'm not saying vibration, I'm not saying geolocation, I'm saying use cases. Activities are use cases of the interface and that users have to do. So for example, if I say new Moz activity dial with a telephone number, the app would actually send the user to the app that they use to do telephone calls. This might be the out-of-the-box dialer app, or something like Skype, or something that people use for telephony over IP. The user will not, your app will not call that number. The user still has to press the thing and initiate the call. When the user hangs up, it goes back to your application and tells you how long the call went and which number was called, or if it was successful or if the other side hung up. So it's not like the tell domains that you have in iOS that just brings you to the dialer and you hope the user goes back to your application. It's a full loop with data feedback, what came from the activity as well. So for example, to pick an image, you can say the activity should be pick, and you send the MIME types of the image through. And then the user gets asked, hey, they want an image. Do you want it from the wallpaper, from the gallery, or want to take a picture with your camera? As the app developer, I don't care where your picture comes from. As long as you give me a picture, that's what I need for my app functionality. And the user is in full control to actually give me an image from where they want to have it, rather than having a camera access in my application that doesn't allow me to upload that great photo I already had in my gallery. This is the interface what it looks like. Once it actually has picked the photo, this is the code to actually put it in the page and do stuff with it. It's then going to be in the domain of your application, so you have full access with it with, for example, Canvas. Can manipulate the image, put filters on it to make them prettier, whatever you want to do. These activities actually work on Android as well. So we invented them for Firefox OS, but if you got Firefox on your Android, they totally work on a Nexus 4 or a Nexus 1 or whatever Android phone you have. So we made it available for web developers on a much, much larger scale, even if Firefox OS is not on your radar. Whatever you do, HTML5 is never a waste because it's a format that can be converted to something else. You can use PhoneGap build.phonegap.com, which is an online tool where you can upload your HTML5 application, and it wraps it up as an iOS application, it wraps it up as an Android application, Bada, WebOS, whatever that I is, I forgot iMode, BlackBerry. You can convert your app into a native app. If you write it as an iOS app, it's an iOS app. You cannot convert that to anything else any longer. But when you start with HTML5, you can cover today's markets and tomorrow's markets. There might be a new provider coming out next month that is awesome and really cheap. I hope so. I want more of those. The big thing also to understand about the interface in applications in Firefox OS is that we broke the model of a market space. Right now, if I wanted to have an app about a band, for example, I have to go to the marketplace. Hopefully there's one that is actually listed as the coolest music app that you should have. So I click on that one, I download it, I install it, I say yes, 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 please access everything on my phone, I don't care. And then I actually start listening to music and the interface is horrible and I hate the application and I uninstall it. While I had 30 meg going over the traffic that I have 250 meg a day on the SIM card that I'm using at the moment. Or I go to the category of music and find music apps, read a lot of reviews that probably were paid for by the music company and find out that I'm liking something there. It's a lot of hit and miss. And sometimes we have the Stockholm syndrome, where we've been using an app for years and start liking it, although we hated it from the very beginning. I have this with iTunes. iTunes is not interactivity. This thing is horrible. But there's no other way of using it. So I'm like, actually, by now, everything should be like that. No, shouldn't. But we get used to them. So what do I mean by that? So what we do instead is you enter the name of a band and you find music applications. You enter the name of a movie and you find movie applications. You enter the name of a vegetable and you find cooking applications. You enter the name of an area, you find restaurant applications. So we bring the use case to the app. You don't need to know the name of the app. You don't need to know how it was reviewed. You just can try it out immediately. And we can try this out live now if the connection helps me here by using the Firefox OS simulator. So this is the simulator that allows you to do 99% of your work in Firefox OS on your desktop machine. Windows, PC, Linux, whatever, or Mac OS X as well. So if I now go to the right here and I enter, for example, I don't know, U2, it's easy to type. Yes. You see the background changed to U2 already. So it found things for me. YouTube, GrooveShark for music, SoundCloud for music. If I now click on SoundCloud, it finds U2 songs for me. So the search that I typed in, that the end user typed in, gets sent to your application. It doesn't get lost. People don't install and have to do the search again. It just gets sent through. So now I can use SoundCloud and I'm like, okay, SoundCloud was awesome. I really liked it. This is the HTML5 website of SoundCloud. This is not the application. It loaded like this. I didn't have to go through installer. I didn't have to download the whole thing. I didn't hope that it actually is on a fast server. It just tried it out. If I'm now happy with it, I can do a long click and install it. And this brings it to the home screen. And now I got SoundCloud here as well. And if I now double click it, I got it in full screen and no, it's just another app. And that did all the downloading of the full application. If they had a manifest file for us, it would do the local storage stuff for you and it would give you all the extra access that you need. So you don't need to know the names of applications to start playing with them. And even better, end users don't need to know the name of your app. You can save the money of printing stickers and t-shirts with the logo of your application and build software instead. How about that? It's probably a good idea. That's a live video of that. If you want to start developing with that, the browser is your editor. And that's every browser out there, even Internet Explorer, even Safari. They all have the developer tools in them, and that is pretty awesome. In the past, when I started, I had an alert. That was all I had to debug. And nowadays, I can go in here and I can say inspect element. I can see the CSS that is applied to everything. I can find out the fonts that were used. I can see the box model size of that. I can resize the application to different sizes of phones. So for example, this would be a Firefox OS phone, or this would be a tablet, or a phablet as they call them now. Or you actually can resize it to an iPad 1. And you can do that while all the developer tools are still intact, so you don't need to actually resize your browser to the right size to test out your responsive designs. This is in the browser for you. Another fun thing is the 3D view of your page that actually shows you how deep your page is actually in DOM access. So how many levels of DOM do you have? Which in this case here is not very impressive, but if you go, for example, to Facebook and you see how much HTML they're using, you can actually start seeing like, hey, look at that. Let's go to Facebook City. I have no idea what's going on there, but you can actually debug the depth of your HTML and see some performance issues that way as well. You can also turn on the reflowing. So all the things that are colorful here that you're seeing right now means the browser had to do something to make them look different again. The more you have of those, the less your application performs. So that's a great way of testing out what's going on in your application if it's slow and you have to find out why something is going on. For example, an animated GIF somewhere in there would completely blink and tell you that the browser is actually suffering from what you're doing here. And this works across browsers, and in Firefox we build all the things in. We have a simulator, which I just showed you already. This is basically simulating a phone on your hard drive. You don't need a phone to develop. You don't need to wait for a phone to develop. It sickens me how many developers come up to me and say like, I would love to develop, but I can't afford a phone. As a web developer, I had a really shitty old computer and a text editor, and this is how I wrote my first website. This is how I made my first money, by building a website for other people. You should not be dependent on hardware that might be outdated by the time it arrives in your house before you start developing. So with the simulator, you get 90% on the way. Another really cool thing that I showed off earlier was JSFIDDLE, that actually allows you to edit things in live together with other people. And what JSFIDDLE now has as well is that if I start a new JSFIDDLE, or I use one that I've done before, let's see what I've done there, that could be embarrassing, but we'll see. If it connects, or not. Oh, come on. Okay, while that's loading, you can do at the end of a fiddle, you can say /webappmanifest, and then you get a manifest file generated for you. And you can copy and paste that into the emulator, or on a phone to install the application and try it out. You can also go to /FXOS HTML, and then you get an install button to install the application on a phone or on another phone where you don't want to type in the full URL of that manifest. This is not good with the connectivity, seeing that you need it, right? Anyways, hello. This is what JSFIDDLE now does for you, and that made it so much easier to test out a little application and try it out. Because before that, you had to have a server or you have to put it on GitHub, and GitHub is awesome. Everybody learn GitHub right now. There's nothing else you will ever need after you learn GitHub. It's just wonderful. Or Git and then GitHub. But with JSFIDDLE, you don't need to install anything. You don't need a server. You can just try it out live on the web, and hopefully when it's loading ever, you can actually see the thing going on as well. Well, that won't happen right now. Another thing we gave you is Firefox OS components. So basically, the interface that Firefox OS is, everything you see here, that is the operating system itself, all the different, the scrolling things, the search box, the edit interfaces, the install dialogues, all of those are available on GitHub, open source for free as well. You can use these to build your application, to make them look native on Firefox OS, which people want a lot on iOS and want a lot on Android. It should look like an iOS button if I'm on iOS. I think this is good, but also dangerous, because it makes your application look like something that belongs to the operating system, and people then want it to have much more functionality that you can give at times. But it's an opportunity for you to take a look at what we've done, have a laugh at the code that we've written, and say you can do it much better, and send your better code to us, and then we hire you. That's another option. Another thing we have is the building blocks in there as well, where you can actually see the source code and see the CSS of all the different things. You can use them in websites as well. It's all Creative Commons licensed or something, or GPL licensed, something like that. You can use it. It's for free. It's for you to use and play with. We also worked on something called Mozilla Brick. And Mozilla Brick is taking a different approach because the widgets done in the UI framework and any other UI framework like jQuery Mobile or Sencha or all the other ones out there are actually written in HTML and JavaScript and intercept what the browser is doing. So when I showed you the coloring earlier, shows you what the browser has to do to show something on screen. Now, if you build widgets that use JavaScript for animation or do like rotations and things like that, you actually tell the browser to do extra work on top of what it's doing already. With Mozilla Brick and web components, which is the technology under that, it works the other way around. You just write, for example, here an X flipbox. So you write this code here and you do a front face and a back face, and then the browser renders this while it's rendering the page. So your application does not intercept the browser any longer, it just becomes part of its rendering flow, which means it's much, much faster, it will use much less battery, and you don't cook eggs on your computer after half an hour like you do with some flash games or things like that. This one is in the making. There's lots and lots of little bricks that are already there, and we're shifting a lot of the UI components to web components as well. So this is something that's very much backed by Google as well and by Microsoft, and we're all working together on that because we found out it's unfair for web developers to have to know why a browser is slow if we could give them access to making their widgets part of the rendering flow, which causes security issues as well, but we're working on all of those. Web activities I showed you before might be a bit hard to get your head around, so there's a boilerplate. The boilerplate application for web activities allows you to actually do all the activities and try them out. Then you go to the source code, you get rid of the buttons you don't want to have, and you put your code in the event handlers of the buttons that you want to use, and you've got an application using web activities. It's a very good way of starting with web activities, a great way for us to test that web activities work as well, by having all of them in one big file. One big thing we released here, which is alpha, and please break it, that's why we put software out, is the Mozilla AppMaker. And what that one actually allows you to do is click together an application using web components in the browser and publish it from the browser. It's like friggin' magic and stuff, and unicorns and all kind of things. So this is what it looks like. So I can say, for example, I want to have fireworks in my app. That's always pretty awesome. And I want to have a button up there. I drag that one in. And I want to have, for example, a metronome. A metronome is something that you say happens all the time and starts doing it. And as I put the metronome in there, you see now that the fireworks happen in the movement of the metronome. So this one will not be, Mom. Yes. This one basically, the metronome will not be visible to the end user. It's just for you to see how to make something happen all the time. And I haven't played much with it by now, but actually let's take a look at the settings here. So the period here now is 1, but if I say 0.2, for example, then the fireworks are much, much faster. So there's lots of them happening rather than one at a time. And the colors here mean that there's different broadcast channels to put things together. And when you're done, you can actually say publish. The app has been published to this URL here. And then I can actually use it in my browser, or I can take this URL, put it in the emulator, in the browser there. Let's see if that happens. And install the application. And once I installed it in my emulator, I can go back now, my flathead, and I've got my button and my metronome and my fireworks as an application. I can do the same thing on these phones. I can do the same thing on an Android phone if you have Firefox on the Android phone as well. So that will make it very, very easy for people to build their own first application and for you to publish these little tools, these little extra buttons and stuff to go into. I don't know what's going on here. So that's AppMaker. In our booth over there, upper floor, that's where the people are who wrote that thing. Please tell them to put unicorns in, put whatever you want in, because this thing should come out there and make it easy for everybody to start developing. Now, other resources, if you want to read more about this stuff. We're not here all the time, but we're happy to answer things on Twitter as well. There's a Firefox OS overview page for mom and dad users and for people who are actually in sales. So that one explains you in a beautiful manner what Firefox OS is about, what makes it different to other operating systems, why is it a good idea, and why it's actually something that the world needs right now. So it's beautifully done. Not that fast on Firefox OS itself, but that's how it is. The marketplace is where you get apps, where mom and dad users get apps, because they don't want to hunt for install buttons on the internet. And that's also where we review your stuff, and that's where people send reviews in. That's where your ratings will go. This is the iOS market for the open web, because technically these can also be running on Chrome apps, on Chrome devices, on Tizen devices. I'm going to speak at the Tizen conference or the Samsung conference about this, so I hope we can actually come to an agreement that apps like that should run everywhere, because they're HTML5. They're not Magic. They're not Firefox only. The developer hub is where you get information about everything when you want to start building. So this one has, for example, concepts of what makes a great app, how to design an application, UI ideas for applications, UI guidelines, what should you do, what should you not do, like no Comic Sans, please, people have seen that enough. How to build an app. So there are great reference apps here that you could, for example, download. So you can say Chrono is a simple chronometer app that you can download. The code is there, the app cache is set, you can actually just change that, put your logo on top of it, try to sell it. Probably not going to happen because there's enough chronographs out there already, including this one on the marketplace. But the source code is available for you to get inspired and to actually build things with. And there's the information how to deploy your application, how to make money with your application, how to actually get your application reviewed, and how to get it in the marketplace. This is all happening here. It's the information for developers, what the marketplace is about. The Hacks blog is where I spend a lot of my time writing articles. So there you find all the information about coolest, newest things in Firefox OS, in HTML5, and in web standards. So we're very much on the go of publishing twice or 2 or 3 articles a week with new cool information there. So please comment on there if you find issues, and read up on information that way. We made a video series of Firefox OS as well, where I interviewed different people who are actually in Firefox OS, who are part of Mozilla, part of Telefonica, and we're talking about all kind of technologies used in Firefox OS and what they mean. So basically the 1-hour thing I gave you right now in 5-minute videos with different people. There's 6 of them out there already, 8 more to come. Dan over there is in the other videos with me, and he was unhappy being on camera, so please watch them and vote them up, so he's actually much happier after that. The wiki is, of course, where everything happens. The wiki is where we collate the information, where you find the newest, coolest information, and there is this magical edit button. If you find something that you're pissed off about, click that button and change it. We will know that you changed it. We're happy that you changed it. If you made good things, not when you put bad things in. But it's a read-write thing. It's a wiki. And every information, the coolest, newest information about everything HTML5 and open web related is on the Firefox wiki, is on the Mozilla wiki, or on the openplatform.org. Openplatform.org. No, that's the Guardian. Webplatform.org. Webplatform.org is another wiki where there's lots of great information. So don't ask people on Stack Overflow how HTML5 works. They don't know. They're all Java developers and unhappy with their life and will tell you HTML5 doesn't work. Read this stuff. You find the information there, easy to understand, translated in several languages. And if you want to translate, please translate. We need it for everybody out there. I think we're almost there. Yes, I'm Chris Hallman. I'm available on Twitter at CodePoet. These slides are available on the web as well. I'm going to tweet that out in a second.